We are living in an era where the definition of the ideal man has been heavily distorted by Hollywood romances and shallow social media philosophies. Just look at a scenario playing out every single night in millions of homes across modern Western metropolises. The man standing beside you is a flawless model of decency in the eyes of the world. He is sweet, attentive, constantly avoids conflict, and is always ready to defer to your decisions, from the smallest details like what to eat tonight to major life plans like financial strategies. Society, your friends, and even your family will tell you that you have hit the jackpot, that you possess the perfect partner, a textbook nice guy. He doesn't go out drinking, he doesn't cheat, and he always says yes to your every demand. But behind closed doors, when the spotlight of social validation fades, you begin to feel that something is profoundly wrong. Your relationship is free of explosive arguments, yet it is suffocating, filled with a heavy, unsettling energy that you cannot quite put into words. After a minor disagreement over a trivial matter, or after a stressful day at the office, he abruptly cuts off all emotional connection. He doesn't scream, he doesn't smash things, and he doesn't project his anger overtly like classic bad guys. Instead, he opts for a mechanism far more subtle and cruel. Emotional freezing. His face goes completely blank, his eyes glued to his phone or computer screen like a stone statue, turning you into an invisible ghost in your own home. When you try to approach him, swallowing your pride to ask in your most grounded, constructive voice, "Are you okay? Talk to me. Let's figure this out together." The response you get is always a soulless script, repeated like a machine. "I'm fine. It's nothing." Yet the entire atmosphere surrounding him, the way he slams the door, the heavy footsteps, or the icy indifference, screams the exact opposite. You know damn well he is not okay, but you cannot seem to breach that thick, invisible wall. This is not a healthy silence for reflection or self-regulation, space to cool down. It is classic passive-aggressive behavior. It is a covert punishment through coldness, designed to control and manipulate your emotions, forcing you into a guilt trip even when you have no idea what you did wrong. If you continue to use reason and logic to force him to speak, you will inadvertently trigger his ultimate defense mechanism, trapping the relationship in a classic psychological loop: the anxious pursuer and the avoidant distancer. 1. Unmasking the nice guy syndrome through a scientific lens. To truly decode this silent vault, we must strip away any romanticized lenses and look to the foundational behavioral psychology of Dr. Robert Glover in his globally paradigm-shifting book, No More, Mr. Nice Guy. This book exposes a brutal, illusion-shattering truth. These decent guys are not actually decent in the way they project themselves. Their obedience, deference, people-pleasing attitudes, and flawless masks do not stem from a place of pure, generous souls or emotional maturity. On the contrary, it is a survival mechanism forged from deep-seated insecurities and core wounds within a highly fragile ego. From a developmental psychology perspective, these men typically grow up in emotionally dysfunctional families. This could be a household with an authoritarian, addicted, or emotionally absent father, which forces the child to constantly please the mother just to find a sense of safety. They learn a fatal survival lesson early in childhood, that their authentic selves, with all their anger, demands, and flaws, are simply not good enough and will be rejected. They believe they only have value and deserve love when they make others happy, completely suppressing their own egos to remain the good boy for their mothers or teachers. As adults, they carry this exact fear of rejection and conflict avoidance straight into their romantic relationships. They become trapped in a clinical psychological condition that American experts call people-pleasing syndrome. They do not dare to live authentically with their own desires, legitimate needs, or even their darker shades, the raw, untamed aspects of their masculinity. Instead, they attempt to control their surroundings and control you by becoming a cookie-cutter man who never causes trouble and never says no. Their kindness, therefore, is not authentic generosity. It is a calculated manipulation strategy driven entirely by fear. They invest kindness as a currency to buy validation, security, and to ensure that you become emotionally dependent on them so you will never leave. They believe in an unrealistic theorem, that if they do everything right and perfectly, they can control how others react. Their lives will be smooth sailing, and they will automatically net a conflict-free happiness without ever having to face any risks. 2. Covert contracts, the toxic transaction in relationships. The core behavioral pattern and emotional collapse of a nice guy operate on a pivotal concept that Dr. Glover calls covert contracts. This is an invisible, selfish, and highly calculated set of rules that they unilaterally establish within their own minds. This contract is uniquely toxic because the woman standing right next to them has absolutely no idea it exists, has never discussed it, and certainly never signed up to participate in this transactional game. A nice guy's covert contract typically consists of 3 core clauses that dominate his entire behavioral pattern. The first clause, if I am always good, always proper, and never do anything to upset her, then she is obligated to love me, adore me, and never leave or criticize me. The second clause, if I voluntarily meet all of her needs and sacrifice my own desires to please her without her ever having to ask, then she should have the telepathic ability to read my mind and fulfill all of my hidden needs and unspoken cravings without me ever having to say a word. The third clause, if I am a perfect man and a flawless husband, I automatically deserve a smooth life and a relationship completely free of any conflict or arguments. The reality trap, and the ultimate catalyst for all relationship tragedies, is that the real world never operates under such absurd, delusional clauses. The woman beside them is an independent individual with her own pressures and emotions. She is not a psychic or a therapist who can read the resentment, longing, and silent sacrifices hidden behind his submissive smile. When life gets messy, when the woman inadvertently fails to meet these unrealistic, imposed expectations, or when she offers some straightforward feedback, the nice guy instantly feels that his covert contract has been severely breached. He immediately defaults to a victim mentality. Because they suffer from a deep confrontation phobia, they choose not to engage in direct, adult conversation. Instead, they accumulate a massive reservoir of silent resentment. The toxic silence, the icy attitude, and the emotional withdrawal that you are forced to endure are exactly how they vent that resentment. They are weaponizing silence as a power dynamic, a form of silent punishment designed to make you pay for failing to comply with a contract they drew up entirely in their own heads. 3. Redefining vulnerability and true emotional surrender. In modern relationship psychology, we hear a lot about concepts like healthy vulnerability or opening up. When modern women ask their partners to show vulnerability, we often only understand and accept it at a very surface level, very safe capacity. We think that as long as he sits down and talks about financial pressures, being exhausted after a long day at the office, or some vague anxieties about the future, the two have achieved a deep understanding and a soulful connection. But you need to wake up and realize this. For a man carrying the nice guy syndrome, these moments of opening up and venting are actually just another safe mask. It is a calculated piece of emotional bait, a pity-seeking victim play tactic designed to disarm your suspicion, dodge harsher criticisms, and maintain a state of fake harmony. True emotional surrender, from a clinical psychology perspective, is a brutal, agonizing process that requires far more courage than that. It is not a romantic afternoon tea. It is the exact moment a man dares to tear off his decent saint mask, shattering the perfect image he has painstakingly built, just to expose the parts of himself he considers the most selfish, ugly, stained, and inadequate right in front of you. It is when he dares to frankly admit that he didn't want to yield to you in the last argument, that he only backed down because he was terrified of you losing your temper. It is when he admits he harbors raw cravings, anger, and deep-seated resentment toward your behavior that he has suppressed for years. It is when he stands before you, stripping away the title of the man who is always in control, to shiveringly confess his ultimate fear of failure, his profound insecurity about his earning capacity, and the fact that he is completely losing his grip under the weight of life. Exposing true vulnerability is not a self-pity show designed to fish for a mother's comfort from a lover. It is a supreme act of courage. It is when a man accepts the risk of your judgment and the risk of rejection just to show up before you as his rawest self, complete with primal instincts, weaknesses, and flawed deficiencies. If a man lacks the courage for this emotional surrender, all of his kindness and care are nothing but a theater play staged to manipulate the relationship to his liking. Four, the three defensive shields and the failure of the emotional chase. The most common, systemic mistake women make when confronted with a partner's silence and emotional withdrawal is attempting to use pressure, highly logical interrogations, or emotional outbursts to force him to talk. When you see him go silent, it triggers your own anxious attachment style, turning you into the pursuer. You relentlessly push him with questions like, "Why won't you open up to me? What is wrong with you? Do you even consider me your wife/girlfriend?" These questions, though born out of a good intention to solve the problem, function neurobiologically as a direct assault on his already overloaded and depleted nervous system. Every communication technique or linguistic art will completely fail if the space between you lacks absolute psychological safety. This is because, at this exact moment, the man's brain is heavily guarded by three highly sensitive defensive shields of the masculine ego. The first shield, the toxic shame loop. Unlike healthy guilt, where a person recognizes they committed a wrong behavior and wants to correct it, toxic shame is a deep, core belief that one's entire being is a mistake, an inadequacy. When facing intense pressure or failure, a nice guy doesn't just think he did something wrong, he thinks he is helpless. An accidental judgment, a disappointed sigh, or a scrutinizing look from you will instantly trigger this toxic shame loop. To defend himself, his brain immediately defaults to stonewalling, erecting an impenetrable wall of silence to protect his last shred of self-esteem from being crushed. The second shield, threatened masculinity. Men are biologically hardwired and socialized to be problem solvers and protectors. They are utterly terrified of receiving pity from the woman they love. Being viewed as weak or incompetent is an absolute incineration of their ego. They would much rather appear aloof, cold, and emotionless to maintain the upper hand and the posture of someone in control, rather than humble themselves to receive your patronizing comfort or maternal coddling. The third shield, neuroco-regulation. Men possess a highly acute neuroception, a neural radar that constantly scans the emotional state of their partner. If you approach him with an energy of panic, control, anxiety, or resentful victimhood, his brain will instantly arrive at a biological conclusion. This woman is unstable. She is not grounded enough to contain my raw truth. Sharing the truth right now will only bring trouble and greater conflict. Consequently, he chooses to continue carrying everything completely alone in absolute silence. 5. The story of Ethan and Mia. The explosion of the pressure cooker. To clearly see how this complex psychological mechanism operates and decimates a relationship in real life, look no further than the textbook story of Ethan and Mia, a couple living in a modern apartment in New York City. Ethan was the quintessential nice guy, a model husband whom all of Mia's friends envied. He had never raised his voice, nor had he ever argued with Mia throughout their 4 years of marriage. Whenever they hit a difference in opinion, Ethan would always step back, flash a warm smile, and drop his signature catchphrase. "Whatever you want is fine, babe. I'm good with anything, as long as you're happy." Mia genuinely believed she was the luckiest woman in the world. However, the turning point arrived when Ethan's tech startup hit a severe crisis due to market volatility. He was on the brink of losing his entire massive capital investment and was forced to lay off half of his staff. For a man carrying the nice guy syndrome, this wasn't just a financial failure. It was the complete annihilation of the perfect ego he had painstakingly constructed. Instead of choosing to share the burden and shoulder the hardship with Mia, Ethan chose to carry it all entirely on his own. He wanted to maintain his image as the successful, rock-solid man who always had the capacity to provide for and protect his wife. Day after day of emotional suppression, crippling anxiety, and the paralyzing fear of failure transformed Ethan's nervous system into a tightly locked pressure cooker. The negative energy accumulating inside was just waiting for a tiny spark to detonate. The climax of the tragedy struck on an ordinary weekend evening. Mia, completely oblivious to the horrific crisis her husband was drowning in, casually mentioned that she was browsing some new sofa designs on Pinterest to replace the old one in their living room. In any normal psychological state, this would be a harmless comment, a standard conversation about home decor. But under the crushing weight of the toxic shame loop running inside Ethan, his depleted, panicked brain instantly mistranslated that innocent comment into a direct assault. "She's calling me poor. She's mocking me as a helpless failure who can't even afford a comfortable life for his family." Instead of choosing to speak the truth about his company's financial bleeding, Ethan weaponized the absolute worst nice guy defense mechanism. He punished Mia with a suffocating, terrifyingly cold silence. He skipped the dinner she cooked, smoked on the balcony all night, and turned into an emotionally numb ghost in the house for the next 3 days. He avoided her gaze, refusing to answer any questions beyond hollow, lifeless grunts. Mia spiraled into a state of absolute panic. She felt intensely rejected and punished without understanding the reason why. She began chasing him from room to room, interrogating him, crying, and blaming him for being cold-blooded and heartless. Mia's frantic approach, her tears, and her erratic energy only pushed Ethan's nervous system into a dangerous red alert. His brain concluded that this space was completely unsafe, forcing him to lock his heart even tighter, build an even sturdier stone wall, and retreat deeper into his solitary cave. 6. The high-value woman's strategy, boundary setting, and groundedness. The turning point that saved their relationship only occurred when Mia, after 2 days of crying and emotional exhaustion, woke up to a sober truth. She was turning herself into a pawn, a victim in Ethan's toxic game of emotional hide-and-seek. She realized that her panic was only enabling and further triggering his defense mechanisms. As a high-value woman equipped with modern psychological awareness, she refused to keep playing the mother who runs after a brooding child. She also refused to let his punitive silence manipulate her personal happiness. Mia decided to completely stop the interrogations, cease the relentless texting, and dedicate an entire day to regulating her own nervous system through meditation, exercise, and intentional space. That evening, when Ethan returned home looking drained and ready to retreat into his silent vault, Mia completely flipped the script. She brewed 2 warm cups of tea, quietly sat down on the sofa across from him, and maintained just enough physical distance to respect his personal space without making him feel cornered. She didn't bring up the new sofa. She didn't blame him for his icy, heartless behavior over the last 3 days, nor did she act petty or cold in retaliation. She just sat there, sipping her tea, breathing deeply, and radiating an incredibly grounded, calm, and centered energy. After 20 minutes of soaking in clean silence, a healthy silence completely devoid of hostility or anxiety, Ethan's neural radar scanned the room and confirmed that Mia was entirely regulated, with zero intention to attack or judge. Slowly, his defensive shield of shame began to crack and drop. Mia gently set her teacup down, turned to look straight into Ethan's eyes with a steadfast yet compassionate gaze, and delivered a clear, unshakable message that defined the personal boundaries of an independent woman. Ethan, I can clearly see that you've been carrying a massive amount of pressure entirely on your own lately. It is completely okay for you to need space to think and process things, and I fully respect that. But I need to be very clear about one thing. Completely ignoring me, turning me into a ghost, and using this icy silence against me for the past 3 days is a severe violation of my personal boundaries. I will not accept this passive-aggressive behavior in our relationship. I am here beside you as your wife and your equal partner. My respect and love for you have never changed, and they will not vanish just because you face failure or fall short of perfection. I am grounded enough to hold space for your raw truth without judgment. Whenever you are ready to drop this mask and communicate like 2 mature adults, I am right here to carry the weight with you. 7. The first golden principle. Absolute calm to regulate a crisis-ridden nervous system. Mia's turnaround strategy exposes 3 fundamental golden principles that every modern woman must master if she wants to confront her partner's nice guy syndrome without eroding her own value and self-respect. The first principle, and the absolute prerequisite move, is this: maintain absolute calm to co-regulate and de-escalate his crisis-ridden nervous system. You must understand a profound neurobiological truth. When a man faces the imminent collapse of his perfect ego, his biology triggers a full-blown fight-or-flight response. The moment he steps through the door, his primitive survival instinct is actively scanning your facial expressions, your gaze, and your vocal tone to detect any signs of judgment, criticism, or disappointment. The fatal mistake most women make is allowing their own anxiety and insecurity to be swept away by his wall of silence. They instantly react with heavy sighing, excessive worry, weeping, or display emotional panic. Through the lens of the masculine brain, your instability immediately validates and reinforces the absolute greatest, darkest fear ruling his head. I really am a terrible, helpless man. The truth about my struggles only brings suffering, burdens, and panic to her. She cannot handle my real self. And just like that, they choose to lock their heart away permanently. This is precisely why you must master your own nervous system before you can master and redirect the relationship dynamic. When your partner retreats into his cave, control your heart rate with deep, diaphragmatic breathing. Maintain a centered, unshakable posture, acting like a solid anchor in the middle of an emotional storm. Your entire body language, gaze, and energy must project a silent but fierce message. I am a woman of deep inner strength. I am grounded enough, compassionate enough, and wise enough to hold space for your rawest truths and your most devastating failures with a clear head and a sober heart. I am not a fragile glass cup that will shatter under your turbulence or imperfection. Only when he witnesses this groundedness from you will his nervous system receive the green light of safety required to finally lower his defensive weapons. 8. The second golden principle. Attention, not pity, refusing to play the mother. The second golden principle requires a woman to maintain a highly elevated level of rational clarity in her behavior. Offer him your attention and deep understanding, but absolutely refuse to show pity. One of the most common and dangerous unconscious psychological traps for both Eastern and Western women when seeing their man face failure or vulnerability is the fierce awakening of the maternal instinct. When they see him downcast and silent, they immediately rush in to coddle, caress, and soothe him like a mother comforting a child. Or worse, they unilaterally step into the role of an expert psychotherapist to analyze his childhood trauma, offer patronizing life lectures, hand him solutions, and do everything in their power to fix the problem for him. Dr. Robert Glover issued a steel-hard warning in his book. Men may need understanding, and they may need their dignity validated, but they never want and utterly detest pity from the woman they love. When you look at your man with eyes full of pity and sorrow, or when you attempt to shoulder the responsibility of fixing his problems, you inadvertently strip away his core masculinity and rob him of his personal agency. This behavior of over-mothering inadvertently forces him into the posture of a helpless child, an inadequate individual begging for charity and protection within the relationship. Not only does this fail to rescue him from his nice guy syndrome, but it actively worsens the toxic shame loop inside him, making him feel humiliated and causing him to resent you even more. Instead of dropping shallow maternal platitudes like, "You poor thing, let me take care of this for you," choose to listen respectfully without interrupting when he speaks. Validate his raw truth using language that preserves his dignity and masculine power. I understand how much courage it took for you to open up about these struggles with me, and how much you value our relationship to do so. I believe in your capability and your resilience. Give him the space, the time, and most importantly, the authority to face and take 100% accountability for his own failures and mistakes as a mature man. You are his lover, his wife, and an equal partner walking beside him, not a grandmother whose duty is to shelter a helpless little boy under her wing. 9. The third golden principle. Never weaponize your partner's vulnerability. The third golden principle is a survival rule, a non-negotiable moral red line required to protect and sustain the foundation of long-term trust in any relationship. Absolutely never allow yourself to weaponize your partner's vulnerability. You must elevate your psychological awareness to realize this. For a man, especially one plagued by the perfect image facade of the nice guy syndrome, the moment he decides to lower his self-esteem shield, strip away his flawless mask of decency, and lay bare his dark sides, his paralyzing fears, his deepest insecurities, or his devastating past mistakes, he is taking an astronomical risk. He has handed you the master key to dictate and completely obliterate his self-worth. He is betting his entire masculine dignity on your kindness and capacity for grace. Many women perform exceptionally well under normal circumstances when the relationship is at peace. They act as the perfect companions, actively encouraging their partners to pour out their childhood traumas or hidden failures. However, the tragedy strikes when the relationship hits a breaking point, or when a blazing argument erupts over an entirely different matter. Caught in the heat of anger, driven by a desperate urge to win the argument at all costs, a woman may, either subconsciously or intentionally, drag those exact secrets, core weaknesses, and emotional wounds out into the open. She turns what was once shared in confidence into a weapon of sarcasm, attack, ridicule, or character assassination, whether in private or in front of others. For instance, look at yourself. You couldn't even keep your own company from going bankrupt, so who do you think you're lecturing? For the intricate psychological architecture of the masculine mind, this behavior is the ultimate betrayal, a fatal strike that permanently decimates the emotional safety of the relationship. Even if you apologize 1,000 times afterward, he will arrive at a cold, definitive conclusion deep within his consciousness. This woman is unsafe. She is a dangerous threat who will use my weaknesses against me the moment she gets the chance. From that exact second, he will erect a reinforced concrete fortress 10,000 times sturdier around his inner world. He will lock you out permanently. He will choose to live a life of emotional estrangement, coexisting in a hollow, surface-level relationship, but he will never be foolish enough to risk opening up or showing vulnerability to you ever again. 10. Establishing rock-solid boundaries. The shift in the power dynamic. A healthy, happy, and sustainable relationship by the high standards of modern American psychology is absolutely never built on the submissive sacrifices or patient endurance of a woman. On the contrary, it must be firmly anchored on a foundation of explicit, rock-solid boundaries. You must wake up to a steel-hard law of behavioral psychology. A boundary without consequences is merely a weak plea, a worthless beg in the eyes of your partner. When a nice guy uses toxic silence and emotional withdrawal as an invisible weapon to punish and manipulate your emotional state, forcing you into a panic to chase and coddle him. If you choose to continue walking on eggshells, constantly policing your own behavior and walking on tiptoe to please him in hopes that his anger will thaw, you are indirectly sending a signal. Your toxic behavior works, I am terrified, and you are in control of me. You are inadvertently enabling and training him to keep weaponizing that exact tactic in the future. A high-value woman behaves in a completely different caliber. She operates her life from a mindset of absolute autonomy. I love you deeply, but I love myself enough to never accept this uncalled for, cold, and disrespectful treatment. When he chooses to punish you with silence, after you have already delivered a clear boundary message, just like Mia did, immediately withdraw your emotional energy. Give him the silent space he demands, but simultaneously continue to run your personal life in its most vibrant, independent, and high-energy state. Put on a great outfit and go out with your friends, pour your focus into your career projects, hit the gym, pamper your beauty, and relentlessly pursue your own passions. Sit down for a delicious dinner, watch your favorite movie, and get a night of deep, undisturbed sleep, completely disconnecting yourself from his gloom. This behavioral pivot sends a silent but nuclear message straight into the psychology of the nice guy. My presence in your life is a high-tier privilege, not a permanent free guarantee. I am under no obligation to sit here, absorb your toxic, negative energy, and wait for you to ration out a tiny crumb of attention. You must engrave this truth into your heart. You cannot change, fix, or rescue any man. He must experience the natural consequences of his own behavior, the heavy price of isolation, and the imminent risk of losing a high-value woman, to unilaterally choose self-evolution if he doesn't want to lose you forever. That is exactly how you re-establish your boundaries, completely shift the power dynamic, and force the relationship to evolve onto a healthier ground. Ultimately, a mature, sustainable, and genuinely happy relationship demands the presence and interaction of two independent, psychologically differentiated adults. It cannot be a family tragedy played out between an oversized child hiding behind a mask of submissive decency and a grandmother who constantly runs after him to rescue and heal him. Grounded in the core spirit and deepest philosophy of the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, when it comes to the psychological architecture and ego of the male mind, absolute trust is the profoundest, highest tier, and most sacred expression of mature love. It far transcends surface-level romantic emotions, lofty promises, or standard physical desires. A capable man with wealth and social status can easily use superficial gallantry, money, and a flawless, nice guy facade to date, please, and conquer a dozen beautiful young women out there. But a mature man will only choose to anchor his life, surrendering his absolute loyalty, devotion, and his entire hidden world to one single woman. The woman who possesses enough wisdom, inner strength, and boundaries to make him feel that his dignity, strength, and honor remain entirely intact, even when he dares to stand before her to speak the raw truth about his flaws, devastating failures, and weakest moments. The exact moment your man decides to lower his shield of pride and completely strip away his perfect mask to stand before you with all his deficiencies, mistakes, and vulnerability, that is absolutely not a sign of weakness or submissiveness. On the contrary, it is the fiercest, most supreme declaration of absolute trust that he has placed in you. He dares to be vulnerable before you because he deeply trusts that you possess a mental stature and spiritual fortitude large enough to hold space for and embrace his imperfection, without ever using it to judge him or make him feel small. When you possess enough unshakable groundedness, sober understanding, and a system of rock-solid boundaries to receive both the brilliant light and the deepest shadows of a man, you automatically step into an exclusive, unassailable position within his soul, one that no third party can ever replace. You are no longer just an option on his list. You become his ultimate soul sanctuary, the one they are willing to trade everything for and fight for until their very last breath. Because they understand that while the brutal world outside constantly forces them to brace themselves and be perfect, returning to your side finally grants them a sacred privilege, the permission to drop the mask and simply be a raw human being. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this video. If today's reflections resonated with you, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, a simple conversation can open the door to something far deeper than we expect. And if you're drawn to feminine psychology, soft power, and the emotional depth behind human connection, subscribe to Velune Her so we can continue exploring the quiet influence of feminine energy together. I'll see you in the next video.